everyone, so it's Dara again. So I wanted to do the first video, or I should say the second video technically, of motivation for the ESL teacher and student. So for today we're going to talk about your first ESL class. Now for many of us this could be a very nerve-wracking experience or an exciting one. So I have a question for you. Let's say you're a new teacher or an experienced teacher and it's your first day of your ESL class. Let's say you have about 25 students, they don't know you and you don't know them. How are you feeling about this? What are you going to teach? What do you expect from your students and what should they expect from you? Well, I'm here to talk to you about that. There's a lot of things going on your first day of your ESL class. Now, maybe you're working for an agency or for a program where there's a curriculum, maybe there's a contract, maybe there's an orientation, maybe there's testing to be done. There's all kind of admin stuff going on in the background, and some programs will actually require you to take care of the admin stuff, or you might be lucky enough where there's an administrative team where they take care of all the testing and attendance checking, all that stuff. Now as the teacher, you're going to walk into your classroom and you have all these pairs of eyes looking at you. And let me just say, whether you're experienced or new, this can be a very intimidating experience. Now, the one thing I'm going to start off by saying is, whether you're experienced or not, the first thing you should do, very first thing you should do, is start with a smile. You want to start off your class in a positive light, and smiling, believe it or not, is truly the universal language. It allows the people who are watching you or looking at you standing up there all by yourself, and I will stress you will be by yourself, to feel comfortable or at least be curious to hear what you have to say. It also helps you as the instructor to relax. Now even if you're feeling nervous, and believe me, even as us experienced teachers, you will feel nervous. I think it's just a natural human thing. But keep in mind that you just want to take a deep breath and just go with the flow. The second thing you want to do, and again this might seem kind of common sense, but it's good to know, introduce yourself. Now what I mean by introducing yourself, I don't mean come up there and just say, yeah, so my name is Dara, I'm a teacher, I'm here to teach you some English. You don't want to do that. Keep in mind, you are an ESL teacher, you are professional, so you can't talk to your students like they're your best friends. You don't want to come into your classroom, hi, my name is Dara, I'm your ESL teacher, welcome. You see how that could be a little stiff, or a little uncomfortable? You want to be yourself. Let your students see your personality. That's the most important thing. So what are some things you should talk to your students about? Now this will vary by program, this will vary by whoever you're working with, or if you're doing this on your own, this will totally vary because every program, every employer, every expectation is different. One of the things I've learned in my experience, and let me just say, when I first did this, I didn't have a sit down like this is what you should do and this is how you should do it. I was just kind of thrown in there on my first day of ESL class. So let me give you some tips if you're in that situation where maybe you don't have no one sitting down with you to tell you what you should and should not do. In your introduction, you just want to give a brief, introduction of yourself. Now I don't mean giving your whole life story. You want to state your name. You always want to give eye contact. Now this can be a little scary for some of you because for the average person, it's very nerve-wracking to stand up in front of an audience of people, especially if they're staring at you like this, because that just may happen. You want to make sure that you give eye contact. So just watch my eyes in this demonstration. So if you are my audience, which you are, you're watching this, and you're in my classroom, I will look at you, but I also will scan the room. Blah, 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 blah. Blah, 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 blah. Now, why did my eyes move around? It's because I want to scan the classroom. I want to kind of look at everybody, but I'm doing it in a natural way. I'm not going to just stare at one student and then stare at the next student and then stare at the student in the back and then stare at the student in the front. You want to avoid that because again, that can make anybody feel uncomfortable. When it comes to expectations, one thing you should keep in mind that you don't want to come across like this. Like, I expect you to come to class on time. I expect you to do your homework. Because remember, we're talking to adults. And adults and their way of doing things is very different than children. So if you are an ESL teacher coming from a background where you're used to working with children and now you're transitioning to working with adults, there's going to have to be some adjustment to be done. You don't want to treat your adult students as children. Believe me, and I'm speaking from experience, if you do that, not only students will challenge you, but they will end up dropping out of your class. So please don't do that. If you never work with kids, this might be an advantage because you're just going to talk to your students as you would talk to any adult. The only difference is you are a professional, you are representing yourself, you're representing maybe the agency you work for. So you don't want to find yourself being too overly casual, but you don't want to be too stiff either. So you want to find a balance and you want to be yourself. You want to make sure that you let your students know if there is a curriculum involved. Usually when I used to do my orientations, there would be an actual handout of the curriculum. So at this time, this is when I would go through what we will be learning in the classroom. But let's say you don't have a curriculum. Let's say you're in the process of creating one. What you just want to do is keep it general. You know, you just want to let your students know the level that they're in. So for example, this is a level 3 class, which means it's intermediate. You're not advanced, but you're not beginner. You're kind of like in the middle. And my goal for this class is for you to learn life skills, to use the language that you learn in here in your daily life. We will be covering how to read a newspaper, how to look for a job, conversation practice. You just want to kind of briefly give the students an idea of what you want to teach in the classroom, but you also want to state, of course, the rules of your classroom. If there are rules set depending on the job that you are working for or the employer, you want to state that. For example, you must come to class on time, or no cell phones in the classroom, or no disrespectful language, things like that. Even if there are no set rules from your employer, you as a teacher, keep this in mind, you are the driver of this car. You are truly the one in charge of your classroom. So you want to make sure that whatever rules you set forth has to be taken seriously. You just want to make sure there's a cohesion, there's an understanding from day one, so that way if a student does break the rule, you can let them know. But again, if that does happen, you don't want to do this and say, you know, how dare you, you broke the rule. You know, you still want to give them that respect and let them know, okay, something you don't have to do, but I would recommend it. You should also let your students know what they can expect from you. As teachers, sometimes we get so comfortable telling students what to do, what not to do, this is what is required of you, blah, blah, blah. But what about what the students can expect from us as instructors? So you want to kind of put that out there. Let me give you an easy example. I used to tell my students, one thing they can expect from me is a fun learning experience. Guaranteed. Even if you're shy, even if you're totally nervous about learning English, you will have a good time in this class, because my goal is to make sure that not only you're learning, but you're enjoying the learning process. Your own rules that you're going to follow. For example, as your teacher, I will make sure that if I'm ever absent or if there's any emergency, that I will contact you and let you know. Or if I make a mistake, please inform me of that, because I want to make sure that I'm doing right by you. There are little things that you can do or to let your students know that it's not just expectations from them, but also expectations from you. You're a new teacher or an experienced teacher is get to know your students. Now, there are various ways of doing this. It all depends on you and your personal preference. I'm just going to give you a very basic and easy one for anyone who's brand new to this. If you're not sure about how to get to know your students and you don't want to single any one person out, like, excuse me, sir, tell me about yourself. That can be a little nerve-wracking. If it's a lower level class, that can also be a challenge, because if the students does not speak English very well and you point at them, which by the way I would not recommend you do, mainly because it's considered impolite. If you point at that student, number one, now everyone's going to turn and look at that student. That's going to make him or her feel nervous or embarrassed. And keep this in mind, every culture is different when it comes to body language, and I will talk about this later on in this series. So the way, as Americans, the way we use our body language will be very different from the students that come into your classroom. So just bear that in mind. The same way we will respond to things will be different from the way your student will respond to it. One thing you can do is there are these name tags that you can make, or you can just get from your local 99-cent store, like those kind of like those mailing label kind of things, and you could just pass them around and tell the student to write their name on it and put it on their shirt. You can actually demonstrate this, write your own name on the label, put it on your shirt, and so that way you can model for your students what you want them to do. This will be very effective for lower level classes because, again, they're still learning the language. They may not quite understand you, so demonstration is very important. Modeling is very important. If you have the attendance of the students expected in your class, you can actually maybe type out their names already on the label and then pass it to the student. Let's say you have a piece of paper like this. It doesn't have to be yellow. This is just what I could find at the moment. You can actually take this and fold it in half. I hope I'm not covering my face by doing that. And again, it doesn't have to be perfect. You just fold it in half and tell the student to write their name, and then on their desk, they place it on their desk. This is good for both the student and yourself, and here's why. If you're doing any activity where the students are going to be introducing themselves, and let's say maybe they're not sure how to say a person's name, they can always read it. Another tip for you teachers out there is that, let's say it's a name that you're having a hard time pronouncing, or you might just forget. Because let me just tell you, having 25 students in your classroom and 25 different names can be a bit of a challenge. Sometimes you may not memorize it in the first week. So this becomes your best friend. A third tip is you might have some students where their name is, say, maybe their last name is, say, Chen, for example. But maybe they don't want you to call them by their actual name. They might have an English name. They might say, call me Mary. So they might write the word Mary on the card because they want you to refer to them as this English name. But just keep in mind, find out what their actual name is, because you don't want to just go by the English name and then on your attendance you have their actual name, Chinese name, and you're thinking, okay, I'm a little confused. One thing that definitely helps is on the attendance sheet, next to the person's name, write the English name, if they have one. That way you know Miss Chen is actually Mary. Not every student will have an English name. Not everyone wants to have an English name, so you don't want to go into your class with the expectation that every student will eventually have an English name, because that just may not happen. I've had classes where none of my students wanted an English name, and so whatever their name was, I just had to learn it. And that's good for us teachers. It's supposed to be a cultural exchange, so you don't want to come in there and have an expectation that because these students are in your classroom, they should have a name that sounds similar to yours. Let the students make that decision. If they have questions about that, of course you can guide them in that journey. I've actually helped students pick out English names because at their request, but you don't want to push that onto your students. Just be very mindful of that. Activity you can do is maybe have the student turn to their classmate next to them and say, introduce yourself. And you can model this, of course. Like, hi, my name is Dora. What is your name? My name is. You can write this on your whiteboard or blackboard, okay? So that way students can actually read what you're saying as well as practice. You always want to model, always. You never just want to give an assignment to the student and say do it. Always model, because if the student sees what you're doing, they can mimic after you. In my more intermediate advanced classes, what I would usually do is have a little handout of questions where students would have to get up from their seats, walk around, and they have to walk around, so please encourage them to do that, and they would have to find a classmate to answer maybe the first 3 questions. What is your name? Where are you from? What's your favorite food? Or something like this. Get a little crowded, gonna warn you, but you want to encourage them to get up and move around, because this is a good way for them not only to not feel sleepy and bored, but also it helps them to get to know each other. One thing you want to remember is, 1, smiling, because smiling definitely helps break the ice, so to speak. 2, you want to keep the introduction brief when it comes to yourself, and you want to get your students involved by introducing themselves. And 3, you want to just take your time. It's just the first day. It may not go well, or it might go fantastic. You don't know. As long as you yourself and your students can get to see who you are, that is the most important thing. And each day will be different, and you can continue this exercise in the whole week if you like. It depends on your level of students and depends on you as the instructor. If there's a curriculum involved where there's a certain lesson or topic that you have to discuss, by all means. If you don't have any curriculum or you don't have any set syllabus that you're working with, you want to make sure that in that first week you're doing some type of lesson. So the first day is introduction, expand on that. Maybe the next day you can do an activity where the dialogue is a little longer. Maybe you can talk about where they're from. If there's a class where each student is from a different country, this could be a very fun activity, having them talk about where they're from. I'm from China, I'm from Saudi Arabia, I'm from Bangladesh, I'm from Cuba, you know. So it's a really great way to get everyone involved. I hope these tips have helped you in your first day of class. Again, keep in mind, whether you're a new teacher or an experienced teacher, it will vary. But always remember, smiling, taking your time, and really trying to get to know your students and they get to know your true you. And I stress that. Let them get to know who you are. This is a great way to start off the class on a comfortable note, as opposed to being rigid and stiff and talking like this, because nobody likes anyone talking like this, because talking like this makes things very boring. Believe me, I know. Check out my new blog, motivationesl.blogspot.com. The link is down below. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time.